Oh, you just don't want me to have it? Okay. It is working. Really? Can I have one that works? Is it, what was I doing wrong? Oh, the middle one. Middle one. Okay. So, are we still at the same slide? How many times has Richard Williams died? How many? Oh, I'm pointing the wrong way. Pointing this way?
No.
Pointing at my head? Oh. Wow, that works. It keeps doing the same thing twice. I'm really confused now. Did it do it that way or did it do it this way? It's the same slide. Why are we doing the same thing? Why is it going round in circles? Oh, that's back. Are you sure it's the middle one?
Yes.
So are you doing this now or am I? You're doing it. Shall I just give this away? Shall I just put this down? Put this down. I'm gonna walk away. Okay. Now we've done this bit, that's me, in case you were wondering. And round of applause again for Richard Williams. Okay. And now, on to the next slide. Watch this very carefully, particularly the bit with the vacuum cleaner. You can play anytime you want. This wasn't supposed to be stand-up comedy, this was supposed to be... So, he's back. I think it might be... Oh, yes, yes. Could you move that Now, what I want you guys to think about while you're watching this is that every single piece of artwork that you're looking at, from the character cells through to the scenic elements, everything is flat. Everything. There is nothing three-dimensional, there is nothing computer modeled. Every element you're looking at is flat, which means that when he gets his face stuck over the vacuum cleaner and he inflates and he flies around in space and we feel like we're tumbling with him. As with this bit of perspective, this is all in the head of a layout artist. Every single part of it. Okay, you can stop around about here. Brilliant. Okay, round of applause for So what you're about to see, if this works, so when we were working on the movie, there was no guarantee this film was going to be a success. A lot of people at the time said, oh wow, this is amazing, it's the first time people have tried to put cartoon characters together with real performers. This is not true. This was happening over and over from the very beginning of cinema. It goes back to the Journey to the Moon with Georges Méliès. It goes back to the Out of the Inkwell series with the Fleischer brothers. What was different in Roger Rabbit was that they moved the camera. If you remember in Mary Poppins, or did any of you see, I don't know what the Spanish title is for Bedknobs and Broomsticks, but Mary Poppins, the original Mary Poppins, when the real characters meet the cartoon characters, they meet in a kind of parallel world. So the chimney sweep draws a chalk painting on the pavement, and they all hold hands and they jump into it. Yeah, you remember? And then when they get into the magic realm, suddenly they're all wearing brightly coloured costumes and they're very heavily lit. So the real people start to look flat and colourful, like the cartoon characters. Now the guy who's the genius behind the layout work that you enjoyed in the Maroon cartoon a second ago with all of that amazing tumbling is a guy called Roy Nesbitt. And Roy explained to me when I interviewed him for the book that Robert Zemeckis, who was the director of Roger Rabbit, first of all came with Steven Spielberg to London to meet with Dick Williams, and he said, I've done my homework, so we're not going to move the camera because we don't want to make your life difficult. He was like, I'm an animator, my life is difficult anyway. You move the camera the way Robert Zemeckis moves the camera, and we'll find a way of making this work. And later in the presentation, I'll show you some of the elements of how we make that work. If you can click on anybody, yeah, okay. And click again. Yes! So, these are the keyframes of that sequence that you were watching. And if we click one more time, this is the diagram that Roy Nesbitt kept, trying to work out in his head how this was going to be achieved. Because we were still painting cells. We were still creating flat scenic elements. And the cameras that were used to photograph all of the artwork were basically a table and a tower. And the camera was attached to the top of the tower, which meant that it could get closer to the artwork, it could get further away from the artwork, and sometimes it could rotate around the center of the lens. But what it couldn't do was it couldn't explore space. So any apparent exploration of space or any rotation or turning of the camera within 3 dimensions had to be done as a perspective trick in the head of the layout artist and in conjunction with the people who ran the camera department who made it possible to photograph this artwork. Fingers crossed. One more click. And one more click. So this is a diagram to help people work out how to put the shadows on all of those surfaces, on the floor, on the furnishings, on the fridge. Because every shadow that you see in Who Framed Roger Rabbit is drawn by hand. All the shadows on the characters, all the contact shadows between the characters and the floor, the characters and the wall, the characters and the live performers. And this was done using an old procedure called BIPAC. And when I interviewed Roy, he said, oh, I've got a drawer somewhere with all these original diagrams and notes. Would those be useful for the book? And I was like, yeah, bears, forest, whatever, absolutely, please give me these beautiful designs. So you can see it says here, shoot first thing, following day, without moving the camera setup. So this was in the days before Alt-Z. If somebody came in at night to hoover the carpet in the camera room and they bumped the camera stand, you had to reshoot everything that you shot yesterday because it wouldn't register with the stuff you shot the following day. That's how sensitive the stuff was. Okay, so I want you to imagine what kind of single flat piece of background artwork might have to be painted to allow that sense of tumbling in the scene we just watched. So one more click, please. Imagine, if you want to get some idea of scale, up at the top, that's a light bulb. And any of you that know the peg registration system for animation, those are peg holes along the side of it. That's the painting that you were looking at. And that was photographed a frame at a time. They had to build extensions out for the compound cable just to hold the artwork. So I think that's pretty amazing. Anyway, one more click. And this is Roy Nesbitt, the guy who designed it. Round of applause for Roy. For those of you who are not already, how many of you have heard of a film called The Thief and the Cobbler? No? Really? Yes, okay. So this is the artwork painted by Errol LeCaine for the War Machine sequence in The Thief and the Cobbler. If any of you are not already familiar with it, but you enjoy what you see in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, trust me, get onto YouTube and savor what you can find of The Thief and the Cobbler. Another click, please. And one more. Any of you recognize this? So, this, yeah, that guy. So this is the poor little guy who's trying to bury his food before the winter. And this is, I mean, it's a bit of a clue because it tells you at the top, but this is from the first Ice Age movie. Now the guy who... Was everyone asleep before this? Okay, so the guy who storyboarded this sequence, would it surprise you to hear this sequence and this character don't appear in the original script for Ice Age? The reason they put this sequence in was because on a Friday evening, Chris Wedge, who was the director, said, we've got a problem. The movie's called Ice Age, there will be Ice Age on the posters, Ice Age on the tickets, the t-shirts. The first thing we see in the first scene, according to the script, is dirt. Not snow, not ice, dirt, with big animals migrating across all the dirt. And in the corner of the room where they were having the conversation, there was a table of unused character designs by an amazing guy called Peter DeSev. And Bill Frake, who's the artist who created these storyboard panels, picked up one of the designs of this character, which is halfway between a squirrel and a rat, hence his English name of Scrat. And he said, what if this guy was hiding his food for the winter? And Chris Wedge said, great. So this whole sequence was storyboarded by one guy between a Friday night meeting and a Monday morning meeting. So everything you see in, click one more time. And this was a guy who had worked for many years, not only for Blue Sky Studios, but he had also worked, can we do one more click? He had worked for Disney, and during the time that he was at Disney, he worked under the instruction of a guy called Eric Larson. And Eric Larson was in charge of the training program for young animators and young animation artists there. And he, Bill Frake, told me when I interviewed him for the book, back when I was working with Eric Larson at Disney, he talked about how Milt Kahl, now Milt Kahl was the guy who animated Shere Khan, who animated a lot of the human characters and villains in the Disney movies. He would put everything in the expressions, like the key poses on Madame Mim, for example, in The Sword and the Stone. So Richard Williams, who was the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and was the guy who was the first person to hire me to work in animation, he would say the same thing. When the character is acting, the eyes and the hands are the most expressive parts. So in order to translate that same idea into layout, you have to ask, where is the focus in the frame? One more click, please. It's all the same thing. Character design, layout, animation,